Okay, I'm so excited to get going with this, but I think like one of the first questions, and just in terms of like demystifying all of our roles, can I start with you, Emily, in terms of like what does a development producer do?
Working in development is basically you're helping to kind of get the project from this kind of initial idea where it's kind of a pitch or it's a thought in someone's brain, all the way through to it being kind of greenlit, and so that's when it gets kind of ready to be made, essentially. And so each project kind of starts off a bit differently, but often it's from kind of like you start off by meeting with a writer and talking to a writer, and they have a brilliant idea that then you help them develop up. Or, for example, it's like based on something like a book, so your company might option a book, and then you look for a writer to kind of work with that, and so then you kind of help the kind of writer throughout the process on kind of the initial pitch, on writing the script, on kind of getting a commissioner on board from a kind of a broadcaster like the BBC, and then hopefully getting it greenlit and made.
Oh wow, that sounds like such a long process. Like, do you have like varying processes where it can be like quite short or like quite long? Like, what's the medium, you think?
So I think development is long and takes a really, really long time overall. So, for example, I'm working on a couple of projects with the BBC that I think I've been working on for about 2 years, from sort of start to finish, until we're kind of at the point where hopefully we're quite close to getting a green light on them. But it is something which it takes a long time, and especially once you start having commissioners involved, it can take them sometimes 2 or 3 months to read a draft of a script and things, because they have such busy schedules. So it's a real balance between having to be very patient, but then also having to kind of like know when to kind of push things forward and push with things, and kind of make sure that people are keeping things at the top of their priority list.
Cool. Thank you, Emily. Because I was just thinking, like, in order to get to even that stage, there are loads of steps in between that. And I think one of them is, like, getting an agent, because some companies don't take unsolicited materials. Yeah. So I think my next question is for Hannah. If you don't have an agent, how would you go about, like, getting a meeting with, like, a producer or something?
I think for producers, that's easier in commissioning, because you expect projects to be a little bit further along and have a production partner in place. So commissioners are just, I guess, have maybe a weightier schedule, so they're looking for things that are a bit further along in development. But from my point of view, I think I've recently moved into development and very open to speaking to people who may not have agents attached. I think just making sure that you're really concise and sell your idea in as concise a way and as effective a way as possible. So having a treatment or a one-pager, usually being really specific in the thing that you want. So if you just want to have a chat, then sort of saying that in the email rather than just... because I get quite a few scripts that are just sent with just the script and ask for my thoughts, and sometimes that will just sort of become less of a priority in my inbox, because I know there's a 30-page script that needs reading and somebody's been quite vague in what they want from me. But if you specifically want to talk about prospective ideas and see if any of them resonate for me and which ones to send me, or if you've got one-pagers for a few, and then I can ask for the specific script on one that I really like. But I think just getting it, being specific in what help I can offer you, and then also selling the thing that you've got to talk about in as concise a way as possible. It means that I'm more likely to read it and then ask for the next step. Yeah. I think especially in development, producers are looking for ideas anywhere, so not having an agent shouldn't preclude you from contacting producers, I think.
Nice. Because you mentioned like one-pagers and like treatments and stuff, and I remember when I first started, I thought a one-pager was like telling them a bit about myself, and then like just like a little like sentence at the bottom about what the actual project is. And so I was just thinking, like, for people here that may not know what a one-pager is or a treatment, are there places online that they could find like examples? Or?
Yeah, you can kind of find templates, but you can look for specific programs. I think you can Google the sex education pitch. It's a really good one that you see. The treatment that they did for it was really, I think they did it either as a journal or a yearbook. Yeah. And it's so, when you look at that and having seen the finished programme, it's so in keeping with the project that they made in the end, and they just really thought about the best way to sell their project. Just including characters, key characters, a story outline, as much of the story as you know, but kind of keeping that concise. But then I think thinking of things off the page as well, especially in comedy, if you're a writer and performer, or you have people in mind who you want to bring the characters that you're writing to life, sending over a short that just shows those characters interacting, or I've even had things even within comedy where it's very much fictionalised, but for example a story about two sisters who don't star in the series at all, but they sent in just a dialogue between the two of them talking about their upbringing, which helped bring the story to life a little bit and set the context. So I think thinking outside the box in just whatever way best sells the project. Nice. In a way that's in keeping with the tone of the thing that you're trying to get across.
Yeah, thank you. Jo, last but definitely not least, so yeah, as Hannah was saying at the beginning, like, you've got such an extensive list of just like amazing experience that we'll touch on about earlier. But first off, just like to ask, like, what is Screen Yorkshire for people that don't know here today?
So Screen Yorkshire originally was one of the screen agencies, and then over 10 years ago decided to go it alone. It's actually been in existence for 20 years. It's got its 20th anniversary this year, and it's really the main resource for the film, television and screen sector in Yorkshire, in terms of bringing in filming, providing anything from locations. We've got a really incredibly busy crew service. We've got some brilliant programmes that try to address the lack of diversity and the barriers within industry. Beyond Brontes, I think Beyond Brontes person is in the audience. It's got a there she is. It's got a very long title. What's our title for Beyond Brontes?
Beyond Brontes, the Nursery Diversity Programme.
There you go. But I think it's in its 3rd or 4th year, and that's brilliant. That really delivers some results in terms of opening up the industry regionally to people who might not find accessible as easy as it should be. And then we've also got something called the Yorkshire Content Fund, which is our private commercial arm. So we invest in features and TV and games. We've invested in some really big productions. Our most recent ones is Ali and Ava, which I think was BAFTA nominated, and The Duke with Helen Mirren. Wow. So we also did the first series of Peaky Blinders, which, you know, bit of a legendary series. If you watch all the way down to the bottom and watch the credits, you'll see our little Screen Yorkshire thing on there. And then we've got the Talent Development Unit, which is the thing that I've started since I've joined, because we've invested really heavily in crew and in location and bringing productions into the region. But obviously we've got fantastic talent in the region in Yorkshire, and that's something that we really recognised and wanted to kind of focus a bit more specifically on. So that's been my remit.
Wow, amazing. I mean, I'm just talking to you before, I think it just brings me so much hope and happiness. Coming from Northampton, there was always that idea of like you had to go to London in order to make it. And coming from a working class family where we didn't have much money, I spent most of my time in London working on things that weren't creative just to pay the rent and the bills and stuff. So since COVID, have you found like an up in numbers of creatives going back home to the north? Or
I think there's certainly more investment going on in the north, and a recognition that we have an infrastructure and we have amazing locations and that we have talent that shouldn't have to go to London. So I think there is a shift in investment. We've got many more studios opening. The amount of work that's going up here with high-end TV and features massive. So our film department, our locations and our crew service are always absolutely flat out. So there's definitely a lot going on post-COVID. I still think there's a narrative that we've got to try and push back on, because the commissioners, those key decision makers, while there has been some migration up here, obviously Channel 4 is in Leeds, I still think that there's an existing kind of legacy that all happens in London. And I think that's something that we've got it's just going to take time. You know, we can move the building and we can make people come up Monday to Friday, but that sort of historical reliance on going to London is still there. So I think that's something that's going to take a while. That's going to take a period of time. But you know, there's absolutely no reason why we up here in the north should have to go to London to form our careers. We should be able to live and be where we want to be without having to, you know, do what we might have done 20 or 30 years ago, which is just immediately think, if I want this sort of career, I'm going to have to move.
Right. Thank you. And it's just cheaper as well.
And it's cheaper. Yeah, no brainer.
So this next question is for Emily, but I think also for you and for Hannah, is how to spot new projects. I mean, I hear of producers like going to like Edinburgh Fringe Festival every summer, and as Hannah, you were saying, like some people send scripts in. Are there other ways where you spot new talent and scripts and stuff like that, or ideas?
Yeah. So I think with writers it happens in kind of all sorts and every sort of way, in terms of sometimes it's that agents will send me their clients and be like, I've got this client, I think they'd be perfect for you. Sometimes it's from things like the BBC Writers' Room and Channel 4 Screenwriting and like BAFTA Roadcliffe and some of those kind of amazing programmes which generally speaking are free to enter or not too much to kind of to enter, and then obviously they have like a sort of short list of writers that then kind of go around to all the production companies, and then sometimes it is seeing a play and kind of living a play and then talking to the writer, and then sometimes it's kind of like at like industry events or like networking events, and you kind of meet people and get talking and then read their work. So it happens in kind of in lots of different ways. There's not like one set way that all writers come into the industry.
And I think development programs are really important. Somewhere that as a creative you can actually be mentored, you're given a space to be able to just create your ideas, and then they will be able to give those ideas a platform. We've got Flex, which is in its second year, which is brilliant for that. But I'm thinking things like Scratch Me that the BFI run, where you can actually just, as a writer, you can concentrate on character development, and that might not be the final product that you go and try and pitch, but you can take that and then you can develop it in your next stage of your work. So I think development programs are really, really useful for writers, and then you can get talent spotted quite early, and you get nurtured from that point, which is, as a writer, it's really important. You're not working in isolation and then immediately coming out with something that's fully formed. There are lots of little steps until you get to that point.
And I was just thinking, like, for anyone in this room maybe that does have a new script and they want to send it off to a producer, I think something that I learned quite early on is not to rush the process, because I might, for example, have a first draft of a script and then send it off to a producer, and it might not be quite where I want it at that moment, but then you don't really get the second chance to send another 30-pager to someone to read again. So what advice would you give to new writers who maybe have a script that they love, but they potentially need to do like a 1-pager, 2-pager treatment? Like what stage do you think they should take before they pass it on, basically?
I think, like I was saying, that I think, and kind of related to what you're saying, that if I get a script through and there's multiple, it feels like the script makes it feel like it's further along than it might be, because you think, if I find a few faults with a script, I don't know I don't know how you guys feel, but I would be more likely, I think it feels like I'm more likely to say no to it, whereas if you send me a treatment and then there's a level of development we can do together on a script, and it feels like that next stage is a bit more collaborative, then that's easier. So I think having that 1 page or 2 pages, again, whatever you think would sell the project best. So if that is like, you've got some link, again with comedy, like it might be you have some shorts that you've done or something that shows a bit online of the sort of tone or your sensibilities or something, and put a package together. Even asking for that initial meeting and having a chat through ideas might mean that getting the script across might be easier. But I think it can sometimes feel more fixed when you get the script through and you think, oh, this is the finished idea.
Right.
And I even find that with established writers, that they find that they will hold back as much as possible so that the commissioners feel like they can bend it a little bit as they go along.
And it's quite a big ask as well. I think you mentioned it before. If you send your script and you're basically saying, read this, I think this is important enough to use your time to read my script, whereas if you send an outline or a 1-pager and then, a really sharp biog that captures what you've done, or a 3-minute short, there's a difference between reading somebody's script, watching a 3-minute short and reading an outline. And if those two things look promising, then you can have a conversation and read a script that's worth the hour that it might take you. Whereas if you send everything and one bit isn't quite as polished, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot a little bit.
You should tease people, give them a little nitbit, and then get
it's all about flirting.
Okay, so when it comes to Screen Yorkshire, how do new writers come to that? Like, how do new writers work with Screen Yorkshire?
So we've got the programmes that we run from the talent development unit. The biggest thing that we've done to date is Flex, which is for writers, directors and producers who, my phrase is that they're on the cusp of greatness. So they've been, Emily is actually on Flex, so you are wholly included in that. So it's typically you're an emerging creative, so you've got some experience already rather than being kind of brand new to industry. And then what we try to do is give you a 6 to 7 month development period, which is really, really supported. So we have masterclasses, keynotes. We have 3 or 4 quite in-depth in-person days, which are a couple of days each over the course of that period. We give each team of 3, which is a writer, director, producer team. Teams are newly formed, so we are very sort of industry reflective in that way. And it's quite a daunting thing to come on and form a new team with other creatives who you've not worked with before. But we recognise financial barriers. We give each team £5,000, which they've got to do a kind of really simple budget breakdown, and that's to really just help their creative process. It might be that the team want to go on some sort of recce to where their story's set, and do a kind of mini writer's room, and it's to facilitate that ideation essentially.
Nice.
And then we've got drafts throughout, so we've got 3 delivery dates, so we're very kind of realistic in terms of what you have to do in industry to develop a project. And then at the end of that, the teams have an industry ready idea that can be pushed out, and we expect those projects to be able to do the rounds to some degree for next step development. We have an industry showcase with lots of different commissioners, and that's coming up after Christmas. So that takes a lot of energy. With 60 creatives who've gone through that already. Wow. But they are, vast majority are based in the north. In this cohort, the majority of them are Leeds or Yorkshire based. So it's a big kind of seismic thing for us to really focus on talent and to say we know that you're out there and we want to try and give you this, and we want this IP that you're creating to come back into the region where when you've eventually got the green light development, and a couple of projects already have from the first cohort, we want you to come and film it back in here. And we're really interested on Flex about agile storytelling, so how are new stories being told. We're not asking for ideas that are for kind of traditional screen for Netflix or sitting down in front of the telly on a Saturday. Right. We want you to think about now, because 2022 people are watching stories in lots of different ways. They're watching it on the phone, they're watching it immersively, listening to podcasts. There's a crossover between how we tell stories. I mean, that's probably my biggest thing right now, is that shift in terms of the commissioning model, how long we think episodes should be. Right. It used to be a very standard kind of like 4x30 or 6x60, whereas now the story comes first, and that's something that we're trying to tackle in our talent development unit, because we want to be really industry ready and to get creatives to think in an agile way, and just to be kind of slightly ahead of the curve in terms of how to get your projects across the line. Mm-hmm. So, but we're always open to different ways that we can support talent. We've got a brilliant project coming up soon called Scripted, which is to try and expand diversity in the script editor talent pipeline, as we call it in the biz, because there's still so many issues around barriers to access, and if to tell authentic stories and to help, no writer should be able to tell their story but then have to explain what the world is because they've got a script editor who just isn't reflective of the story that they're trying to tell, and that's what we want to try and target with Scripted. So I would encourage everyone to keep an eye out for that, because we will be looking for participants on that programme, and that will also include placements and working with writers in a production company. So trying to, we don't do something tokenistically. We want people to get into industry, to get the experience they need, and then to go out into industry and actually to find the work and do the job.
Right. No, I think I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like sometimes script editors are the like unsung heroes of the industry.
I would say that's true.
Because I think like when I first came to the industry, I didn't know what a script editor was, and then I started working with one when I started writing an episode, and I was like, you are amazing. Like, you've helped me so much in this process. And you mentioned writers' rooms like earlier on, and I just want to say like, how to the writers here, like, what advice would you give to people in terms of that want to join a writers' room, and like explain, if you could explain what a script editor is to the person that's me in the audience today.
Well, I totally agree. They are a little bit of an unsung hero, and they work really, really hard because you've got to keep it all in your head, and it's very much about managing a relationship. So the script editor is somebody who works directly with the writer to help develop the story, and then actually to help develop the script. So there's somebody who has to co-share the ideas, the story arc, the character development. They make sure that the script is super sparkling, no typos. My
best friend.
Yeah, the sort of eyes and ears of the script in lots of ways. And then certainly if you're working on a show as a script editor, you're involved in the story process. Then you're involved in all the different drafts of the script. So from the very first draft to the final script, and then you quite often look after it while it's also being shot. So if you're filming it and then you need to cut scenes and it's too long, then it comes back to the script editor, and they've got to decide which bits to cull from the script that they've looked after for so long. And you suddenly, you put a red pen through it because the show or the drama can't overrun. So it's somebody who will, if you're a writer and you've got a script editor, my advice is be really nice to them, because they will absolutely look after your project, and they'll kind of love it in the same way that you will love it, but they'll also be really honest. I think one of the biggest skills that a script head has is just to be able to build a relationship and a shortcut with a writer, because any writers out there, if you're getting notes or you're being edited, it's difficult. You quite often feel like, somebody's just grabbed you by the shoulders and shaken you when somebody's given you a note, because it's such a personal thing. So a script editor has to try and navigate the emotional landscape of that and still get the note across. So it's kind of like a real art form, I think, that's underrated in lots of ways.
Definitely. And the relationship you build with the script editor, because I find writing scripts can be such a personal, vulnerable thing. And by the end of the process, you're just saying, like, pouring out your whole life story to this person. It's really intense. But yeah, if you get along with your script editor, it's such a beautiful, beautiful process.
It runs deep.
Yes.
It does.
Thank you. So, Jo, would you say that script editing has helped with your role now in terms of what you do?
Yeah, 100. I mean, I've done lots of things. Like, I've been in commissioning and I've been a development producer, but actually script editing is probably, and I've been a storyliner. I've worked in sweaty story offices where you're just hammering story out till 3 a.m. I've done that, but script editing is the thing that is probably a skill that I fall back on the most, because you understand how story works. I can read a script and I'll know pretty much straight away whether it's something that I think will work or not. It's given me a very grounded, deep respect for writers and what it takes to actually put your ideas on the page, but then also the nuts and bolts of how a script needs to work. I've had to really sort of interrogate a script and then make it good, and I've worked over the years with such a vast array of scripts. I've had to polish stuff that I've just thought was rubbish, but when I've had to make it somehow pull it all together and then it's being filmed, and you take a little bit of pride for that, even though your name is not on there. You think, yeah, that was 90% me. And then sometimes you work with writers who are just incredible, and it's very, very light touch, and you just think, I'm in the space of greatness here, and you just kind of look and absorb their talent. So sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes it's a dream, but I think that's probably true for any job, especially in the creative industry.
So you mentioned a couple of them. I want to see if we touched all of them already in terms of like the initiatives and competitions that are highly regarded for writers that catch your attention. So I guess it's like across the board again in terms of for new writers.
You go.
I guess there are the kind of like the really big ones like BBC Writers' Room, Channel 4 Screenwriting, BAFTA Rowcliffe. There's Soho Theatre do the Verity Bargate playwriting one, because we also tend to look at playwriting awards, like things like Verity Bargate and similar. And then there are ones that are sort of more specific to our kind of regions, like things like Screen Yorkshire and Manchester do the Royal Exchange have a writers programme and things like that. So
Contact Theatre do as well, I think.
And then kind of those kind of new writing, like places like Box of Tricks that make a lot of new writing. So there's a lot of different ones, and there are some that are kind of that you have to pay to enter, but there are quite a lot that are free or quite low cost, so they're quite accessible if you've got kind of a piece that you want to get out there.
I think as well, it doesn't matter. Well, I mean, obviously it's nice to win, but I don't think. I just know from having done the screenings for quite a few bursaries and writing schemes at BBC that there's people who've stayed on my radar because I saw their script being submitted, and they might not even have got shortlisted, but they're people that stay in mind and I've sort of kept a note of, and I do keep I've even got scripts that were submitted as part of an application process, so that people. So I think that it is the taking part does count, because the people reading it are all within the industry, and if there's something that works for them individually, then they'll keep you in mind for other stuff.
You've had so many roles across this industry, and I was just wondering, are you noticing more that people are wearing a lot more hats in terms of being a writer and a producer and script editor or director?
I mean, I don't know what you guys think. In my experience, I think that's probably not anything new. I think in this industry you have to be really entrepreneurial. I think we're all secret entrepreneurs, even though we're not calling ourselves Alan Sugar. I think that is basically what you need to be. I've freelanced and I've had staff jobs and I've been freelancing, but you always need to have a plan B. And very few people get to work in this industry and just need a plan A, and then it all works out. And I think if you have always needed a plan B, you can always have different hats that you can put on, so you do a little bit of this, a little bit of development work. I think ultimately work out what that core thing is that you want to do, and it might be developing talent, it might be producing, it might be writing, and there's nothing wrong, I think, with having to do a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of this to get to where ultimately it is you want to go. But I think you've always kind of needed to do lots of different things.
I think for writers as well, I think. I mean, you would know better, but your acting and I think all of your work in the creative industries informs everything else. So you can write roles for yourself as an actress, and again, if you're going to produce a short, then you're going to be the producer and the director of a short for yourself, even before the commissioning process. As part of your treatment or pitch might be. So being able to do an aspect of everything means that you kind of can put a package together for people more easily and create work for yourself by. Creating your own short and being every role within that production.
Yeah, multi-skills.
Yeah.
And because I think as well, the things help each other. So, for example, if you do kind of if you want to be a writer, but you do some reading for BBC Writers' Room or for a competition, and then that gives you a chance to read 50 scripts and get paid to do it, and learn. Oh, okay, well, I like what that person did. I didn't like what that person did, and so I don't think any kind of knowledge is wasted. And I think getting experience of different roles will then help you with the role that you actually really want to do.
Yeah, thank you.
And it is all about relationships as well. So much of it is based on relationships. So if you might be script reading, or you might be working on somebody's short, I don't know, doing continuity or something that you don't feel is that core thing that you want to do. But actually the relationships that you'll make will come in useful somewhere further down the line. So it is all quite valuable, even if you think, what am I doing? This isn't actually who I think I am. I'm here with a clapperboard or whatever it might be, but actually you might be working with the director and they'll be shooting your thing that you've written at some point.
A writer once told me that so much of this work is about being really good at admin and making sure to have a spreadsheet of all the people that you've met, and also just have another little bar of where did you meet this person, what's the conversation you had, so that when you go back to that person you can pick back up, and that helps. Because sometimes you might recognise a face and you're like, you don't know where that person's from. So that also helps. But we spoke briefly about writers' rooms, and there are loads of different jobs that you can do as writers. But how can a writer break into like a room, for example? Like, what's the best way to navigate that?
In comedy, they can, in terms of sending examples of writing over, that's when that is useful. So, but it doesn't have to be like a half-hour script. It's actually probably for comedy better to see that you can be a gag writer. So having sketches that you could send over, or just short form scripts that just get across that you can write funnily. Is a way of getting into writer's room. I in my role now, I'm building up a database of people that we can call on when we have a writer's room, and kind of making those rooms relevant, as Joe was saying about script editors, making sure that the rooms that we put together are relevant to the project and the writer that we've got the main project from. So I'm just building a database of people who can write comedy, who might not have had a full credit yet, but can go into writers' rooms. We did that as part of your bursary scheme as well. You were sat in a few of them. Just to sort of even just build up confidence as well, because I think when you've not been in a writer's room, especially for comedy, and not wanting to say out loud the thing that you think is funny, but you're scared of not landing, trying to get people in the room just so that they feel you can build up confidence and feel braver. But that, in terms of getting into the rooms, just sending over exact short form examples of your writing and being funny within that is, for comedy anyway, is a good way.
I think confidence is a massive thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, daring to contribute, thinking, I think this is funny. Will anybody else? I mean, that's a gauntlet.
And then I guess with sort of drama writers' rooms, how they generally tend to, there doesn't tend to be like you try and kind of apply for things like that, and so it tends to be a thing of like, if you're known to the production company and they like you and they like your work, then when they have writers' room opportunities, they'll then kind of invite you in for those. So for example, I'm putting together a writers' room at the moment, and it's very much looking at like, who do we love, who do we have on our books, who we're working with already, maybe on a different project, but we feel like they'd be perfect for this one, and so it's very much trying to kind of like build those fantastic relationships with those development producers or development execs, so that you're kind of like always at the front of their mind. So when they do have opportunities, they're like, oh, I love this writer that I've either been working with before, or we haven't quite found a project yet, but I really want to work with them. And that's, I think, how it kind of tends to work in drama writers' rooms.
Yeah, I think as well it's also good, because when I wrote my first script, I must add that I was like, okay, cool, this is going to be made into a TV show next year, I'm going to be a star, let's get going. And I think you also need to kind of see that as your ticket into the industry, as like, this is what's going to help me get into writers' rooms as well. So just seeing it in both ways, because I think I was so set on one thing, and I didn't think about the overall arc of what this industry is. So yeah, seeing it in both ways will help.